All right, so to begin our discussion about strategic marketing, the strategic marketing framework for sports businesses, let's go back to our diagram. So at this point, we have a diagram, a framework, and let's start at the beginning with the situation analysis. All good planning starts with a situation analysis. It answers the question of where are we? And of course, the situation analysis typically includes 5 elements. That includes the industry or the sport analysis, updating internal information, that's a self-analysis, a competitor analysis, a customer or fan analysis, and a microenvironmental analysis. So let's start with the pieces that go into an industry analysis. Now, for discussion purposes in this area, I've chosen professional baseball as a frame of reference. But let's start with 2 quotes, 2 of my favorite quotes concerning industry analysis. First, the purpose of the industry analysis is to understand the rules of the game, how it is played, and what it takes to win. So the whole point behind the industry analysis is to understand the framework in which you're going to be operating, the game in which you're going to be operating. The second aspect of this is the essence of marketing planning is relating a company to into the industry in which it operates. The key to success is found in differing abilities of firms to deal with the structure of the industry. So when we talk about an industry analysis, there are 6 things that we ordinarily like to focus on. The first, of course, is the size of the industry. An example, the size of professional baseball. And if we're talking about, for instance, Major League Baseball, we'd be interested in finding things like annual attendance numbers, total revenues, the total sponsorships, total merchandise sales, etc., etc. We then would like to talk a little bit about the distinctions in submarkets and potential structural issues and changes. For instance, marketing a team that it's a major league team is dramatically different than trying to market a AAA team like the Aviators, or a AA or a single A team like the Waterloo Indians. The third thing that we like to talk about are growth rates, and major league growth rates, AAA growth rates, etc., etc. Things that we tend to look at are things like attendance numbers, and you know from a previous discussion that we had that for Major League Baseball, attendance numbers are down. Viewer numbers are down, and sponsorship numbers are perhaps down slightly. So it's important to understand what's going on in the industry overall so that when you look at your own team's situation, you can compare it to what's going on generally in the industry. 3 other things that we like to talk about and look at when we're doing an industry analysis are trends. Trends include new ideas, recent successes, recent failures, new concepts that are being tried right now. Of course, as you know, Major League Baseball is one of those sports that is looking at trying to reopen games by the middle of the season, perhaps having a shortened season and trying to get to a World Series. This is going to, of course, be a struggle for Major League Baseball, but those are things that those are issues that, of course, that Major League Baseball is facing right now that they probably won't have to face again. Other issues, of course, that might come up would be things like the length of the games. As you know, Major League Baseball is not a timed sport, and as a result, many of the lengths of the games have continued to get longer and longer and longer. And that's something that Major League Baseball is obviously concerned with. Money-losing franchises. the cost of the minor league system, et cetera, et cetera. Those are issues, of course, in the Major League Baseball industry, but they could be issues in any industry. And then finally, outlooks. And that, of course, includes things like what's currently working, what's not, and what are the key success factors. What does it take to be a successful Major League franchise today? We have some franchises that are highly successful and some franchises that break even or lose a little bit of money each year. The next thing on our planning trip is the internal analysis. And here I have three quotes that I'm sure that most of you will recognize. The first one is a quote by Dirty Harry from the famous Dirty Harry movies, Harry Callahan from the San Francisco police force. And that is, a man's got to know his limitations. And of course, we always use this quote when we talk about internal analysis, because part of the idea behind an internal analysis is to identify things that you're good at and things that you're not good at. And of course, part of the Dirty Harry's argument was a man's got to know his limitations. The second quote is one by myself, and that is, introspection is probably the most difficult planning activity and perhaps the most valuable. When we do an internal analysis, it is very difficult to be objective when you're trying to evaluate yourself and your organization. You can do this yourself. An example of this yourself, and that is try to identify what you think your strengths and weaknesses are. If you have a significant other, one of my recommendations to see how this works out is to ask them to write down 4 or 5 of your weaknesses, and then see how you react to them, because you become defensive right away, of course, and you argue that those aren't really your weaknesses. And then finally, I have a quote by Knute Rockne, and that is, you should try to build up your weaknesses until they become your strong points. Many of you probably don't know who Knute Rockne was. He was one of probably the most famous of all of the Notre Dame football coaches. And so we always like to have a sports quote in the planning process. So what kind of information do we need for an internal analysis? Well, we need relevant business unit history, goals, and corporate culture. And you'll notice that I have the new Las Vegas Raiders in the background here. But as the Las Vegas Raiders move into Las Vegas and set up shop here, part of their planning process includes understanding their unit history, their goals, and their corporate culture. And they're going to need to figure out how those things fit into the Las Vegas business community. They need to know what their key resources are: people, distinct competencies, physical facilities. Now, one of the funny things about an internal analysis, and I have worked with firms and organizations across a wide variety of industries, and every single time we do an internal analysis, the number one strength that firms say they have are their people. Not once have I ever been with an organization that said our people are one of our weaknesses. They always consider their people their strengths. Now, sometimes that's true and sometimes that's not true, but you're always going to get that response. That goes back to the notion that introspection is a difficult planning activity. So other key resources would be things like distinct competencies. That is, what are we particularly good at? And it might include things like physical facilities. Think about the Raiders as they move into Las Vegas and they have a brand new training facility out on St. Rose Parkway, and they have a brand new state-of-the-art, absolutely best stadium in the country, if not the world, to play in. Other aspects of the internal analysis, we might be interested in some franchise equity issues, and we're going to spend some real time talking about this later on, but these include things like fan loyalty and key associations and other assets like sponsorships and stadiums. In addition, for the internal analysis, we are going to need to know, where are we? And that is, we're going to be interested in previous results in terms of attendance, sales, sponsorships, revenues, profitability, etc., etc. And so one of the things that we tend to look at is something called franchise valuation. And once again, we're going to have a full lecture on franchise valuation, because this is one of the critical aspects of sports marketing when you're trying to value the sports franchise. Also, we're going to need to understand the importance of evaluating past successes and failures. The reason that we like to look at past successes and failures is because they are objectively based views of what an organization does well and doesn't do well. You can say that we're really good at sponsorships, but if you don't have any recent successes in the sponsorship area, and your sponsorships are, you're losing sponsors and your sponsorships are below the league average, then the truth of the matter is, you might think that that is a strength, but in fact it is a weakness. And so it's crucial to evaluate actual successes and failures and then couch them into the notion of strengths and weaknesses. Other things that you might be interested in is current and future new products, services, and experiences. It's probably also important to benchmark your franchise against the competition, and especially the other franchises in the same leagues and in the same sports. At the end of the day, the question is, what is it that we're good at? What is it that we're better than the competition at? And what is it that we're worse at? This leads to the strengths and weaknesses.